Fear is not always the dramatic, heart-pounding panic we see in movies. More often, it's subtle, silent, in disguise. It hides behind excuses. I'm not ready. What if I fail? Or maybe later. It wears the mask of logic, whispering that risk is irresponsible, that change is dangerous. It doesn't scream, it gently persuades, and so we avoid. We delay conversations, suppress our ambitions, and live smaller lives, believing its practicality. But in truth, it's fear pulling the strings. Fear is not the enemy of action, it is the enemy of clarity. Left unchecked, it narrows our perception. It convinces us that safety lies in comfort, when in fact, comfort often breeds stagnation. The modern world rewards careful planning, data, analysis, but rarely does it reward courage. Yet behind every breakthrough, personal or professional, is someone who acted despite fear, not because they were fearless, but because they recognize fear for what it is, not a wall, but a signal. The samurai understood this better than most, and how they related to fear can teach us how to live, not without fear, but beyond it. Samurai were not born fearless. They felt fear just like any other human, the fear of pain, of death, of failure. But unlike most, they trained to meet fear, not avoid it. From a young age, samurai were taught that fear itself is not dishonorable. What matters is what one does with it. In Kenjutsu training, students would simulate combat with real blades, not to glorify violence, but to become intimate with danger. Their goal was not to become numb, but to observe fear without panic. They were trained to take slow breaths in chaos, to remain rooted while others flinched, to accept death as a possibility, and still move forward. One concept they lived by was Fudoshin, the immovable mind. It didn't mean they never felt shaken. It meant their mind was trained to return to stillness quickly, like water settling after a stone is thrown. To them, fear was like a shadow. You don't fight shadows. You move in full awareness of them. Their mental discipline wasn't about brute strength. It was a quiet, cultivated inner readiness, the kind you don't see until it matters most. And that mindset is more relevant today than we realize. Every morning, before taking up the sword or stepping onto the battlefield, many samurai practiced a quiet, internal ritual. They visualized their own death, not in a morbid or self-destructive way, but as a way to disarm fear before it had a chance to strike. This practice was rooted in the teachings of Bushido, the way of the warrior, and captured most clearly in the book Hagakure, which teaches, "The way of the samurai is found in death." This doesn't mean seeking death, it means accepting its inevitability, and in doing so, becoming unshakable. If you've already made peace with the worst outcome, what's left to fear? Modern minds recoil at this, but the samurai understood. Fear grows strongest in the unknown. By naming it, envisioning it, and sitting with it, you shrink its power. To face death each morning is to remind yourself, this day is a gift. This breath is temporary. This task, no matter how small, deserves your full attention. In this clarity, fear no longer dominates. It becomes a companion, not a master. And that clarity, that presence, is what made the samurai so formidable. Not because they didn't fear death, but because they faced it before it arrived. Fear doesn't always need to be conquered. Sometimes it needs to be converted. The samurai didn't treat fear as an obstacle. They treated it as a messenger, a signal to prepare, to focus, to sharpen their edge. In this, they embodied Yojin Yongshin, not anxiety, but mindful alertness. They knew that the best way to meet fear was with readiness, not through obsession or control, but through intentional preparation. Sharpen the blade, tie the armor, empty the mind. This wasn't just about combat, it was a way of life. In our world, fear shows up as uncertainty, an upcoming meeting, a conversation you're avoiding, a decision that feels too big. But if you meet it with preparation, not panic, fear becomes your ally. Prepare your thoughts, ground your breath, visualize the outcome, accept what you can't control. When you prepare with presence, you take away fear's chaos and replace it with clarity. This is the art of readiness, not eliminating fear, but moving with it calmly, deliberately. Because readiness is not a result, it is a state of mind. And those who train for fear are far less likely to be ruled by it. Fear doesn't wait for the right time, it waits for your inaction. Left unchallenged, it builds quiet walls around your life until your world becomes smaller, your steps more hesitant, and your voice quieter, even in your own head. The truth is harsh. What you don't face today will silently shape your tomorrow. Fear makes decisions for you. It decides which chances you never take, which dreams you don't pursue, which words you never speak. You think you're choosing safety, but often you're choosing stagnation. The samurai understood this. To avoid fear is to surrender to it. To confront it is to reclaim your agency. In the modern world, our battles aren't with swords. They're with uncertainty, criticism, judgment, risk. But the internal battle is the same. When you delay hard conversations, when you avoid taking creative risks, when you silence your instincts, you are feeding fear, not protecting yourself. Zen teaches us the obstacle is the path. What you fear the most often hides what you need the most, not because suffering is noble, but because freedom lives on the other side of fear. The question is not whether you feel fear. The question is, are you walking toward it or away from it? For the samurai, strength was not measured by how hard they fought, but by how still they could remain in the face of death. This stillness was not passive, it was cultivated through Zen. Where Bushido gave structure, Zen gave depth. Together, they offered more than courage. They offered freedom. Zen teaches that fear is not something to be destroyed, but something to be seen through. When you sit in meditation and watch your breath, you begin to notice fear not as a monster, but as a wave, rising and falling, passing through if you let it. You realize fear is not permanent, it is not truth, it is sensation. The samurai practiced this awareness through Zazen, seated meditation. Through stillness, they trained their minds to stay open even in moments of extreme danger. Bushido and Zen both taught, the way is in the practice. The mind is the battlefield. To move beyond fear is not to eliminate it, but to stop being manipulated by it. When the mind becomes clear, fear may still arise, but it no longer controls you. You can bow to it, acknowledge it, and continue forward, unmoved. That is the way of Zen. That is the essence of the warrior. You don't wear armor, you don't carry a sword, but you fight battles every single day, at work, in your relationships, inside your own mind. And like the samurai, you are called to choose, to react in fear, or to respond with presence. The modern world doesn't need more noise, more speed, more force. It needs people with stillness in their core, people who can stay grounded when everything else shakes. Your version of Bushido doesn't need to be ancient. It can be as simple as speak the truth, even when your voice trembles. Show up fully, even when you feel unready. Breathe deeply before you respond. Move slowly when you want to rush. Look fear in the eye and bow, because real courage is not loud. It's not reckless. It's quiet, aware, and deeply alive. And courage is not the absence of fear. It's the willingness to walk with it. So ask yourself, not once, but every day, what would my warrior self do right now? Then act, not perfectly, but with honor. That is your code. That is your path. And that is how you face fear.